Good afternoon, my friends, and welcome to episode 35 of My Journey with Jesus. My name is Dave Little, and I am not a pastor or a professional speaker. I'm just a guy living in Madison, Wisconsin, and God has laid it on my heart to put my YouTube channel to use for His glory and to put out these weekly episodes of what's happening in my devotional life and what I have learned and how we can share that through these discussions. The topic for today is hope in the face of trials. Last week we talked about our hope, and we defined hope as the confidence that we will experience the fullness of God's goodness in the present and in the future. We looked at 1 Peter 1, and from 1 Peter 1 we discovered that our hope is a gift from God through His mercy, and that our hope is an inheritance that is imperishable and undefiled, and it is abundant beyond any needs that we may face. And we learned that our hope is a source of joy when we face trials. And last week we talked about some of the trials we were facing as a culture. And if anything, this past week, the cultural turmoil and the trials got even more intense. We had this presidential debate, and it was a contentious debacle. The Supreme Court nomination has, been another source of controversy and chaos in our culture, both in terms of issues about the process and the attacks on the nominee herself. And if that wasn't enough to make this a memorable week in the news and in the culture, we had the diagnosis of COVID-19 that was made for the president and the first lady and a number of other prominent political figures. So just when you think the world can't get any more tumultuous, October happens. So today, let's talk about hope. Let's talk about our daily experience with hope and how we apply the knowledge of God's hope to our daily lives and walk with Him through these times when so much nonsense is going on in our personal lives and in our culture. And we will jump into this discussion by looking at 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 3. His divine power has given us everything we need for life and godliness through our knowledge of Him who called us by His own glory and goodness. This is where we place our hope. Our hope in Jesus, our confidence that our eternal inheritance is secure, gives us the ability to look at our lives and look at our situations in a different light and to fulfill His purpose for our lives, because we place our hope in His divine power, and we know that His divine power has given us everything that we need for life and for godliness. So that is a tremendously inspiring note about what God has given us and how we can place our confidence in that. Taking that a step further, Ephesians 2:10 tells us we are His workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand so that we would walk in them. So God has established this plan for us, that we are created to do good works, and He has given us, through His divine power, everything we need to carry out those good works, because we know that we can place our confidence and our hope in Him, in His fullness, in His goodness, today and in the future. Our hope in Him is like the billion-dollar bank account we talked about last week. And if you remember last week's analogy, if you had $1 billion in the bank and you went to the hardware store — I picked the hardware store because I had happened to have gone to the hardware store last weekend. If you had $1 billion in the bank and you went to the hardware store, would you count your change at the cashier stand? Probably not, because if you get shorted 50 cents or a buck or $5 or $50 and you've got $1 billion in the bank, we know that the minor annoyances in life lose their significance in the broader context of the riches and the hope that we have in Jesus. Today I'm going to take that analogy a step further. Not only does our hope give us perspective when these minor annoyances come up, our hope empowers us to do good works for others, as God calls us to do here in Ephesians 2:10. If you had $1 billion in the bank, let's say I don't have $1 billion in the bank, and somebody approaches me and says, Dave, I have this need in my life and I really need $25,000. Where am I going to come up with $25,000? I don't have that in my savings account. Most of us don't. I'm blessed that I could, cash out some retirement funds or something, but it would hurt. It would be a major life decision and a major sacrifice for me if somebody came to me and said, I really need $25,000. How much different would that question be if I had $1 billion in the bank? You need 25 grand? Good, sure. God, I've got all the money that I need to take care of this need, and I am empowered to grant you this $25,000 because I've got $1 billion in the bank. Now let's apply that analogy to our daily lives. We have got this tremendous inheritance, this $1 billion inheritance that God has given us. And if God calls on us to do something hard, we know that our inheritance is secure and we don't need to be afraid of the risks. Maybe it's not somebody asking for $25,000, but maybe it's something that happens in our daily lives, like, do we enter into a relationship with a difficult person? Presumably we all have difficult people in our lives, people with anger issues, people with personal problems, family problems, people that seem to have more needs than anybody could ever hope to address or meet. And there's a tendency that we might have to kind of avoid those difficult relationships. We might throw away precious time. We might get hurt emotionally. We might even get hurt physically. We might get, we might put things at risk that we don't want to put at risk. When we look at what Jesus has done for us and what he promises to us, no sacrifice is too great. If I get hurt emotionally, I know that God is with me and he will comfort and bless my joy in him. My joy in him is deeper than any emotional hurt that I might experience in serving him. So I'm afraid I'm as a good, not myself personally, but as believers, we can know that we are able to invest ourselves emotionally and not have to worry about the hurt that may come from that, because God gives us love. God gives us peace. God gives us an eternal hope that we know that our future is secure in him, and any tears that we shed today will be wiped away when we get to see him in heaven. I'm reminded of my father. My father, a very godly man, and when he was living in Columbus, he was engaged in a tutoring ministry where he would teach young kids how to read. And he was tutoring a young Vietnamese boy who lived in a very, very poor neighborhood. And even into his 70s, he would travel into this very, very poor, impoverished neighborhood in the inner city to spend time with this young man and tutor this young man and help him with his reading and help him with his math and help him prepare for his life. And who knows what how much time he spent doing that, how much gas money went into that, how much risk he might have been taking if if the family didn't want him in the house and shoot him out of the house for some reason, and or worse yet, if he'd gone into one of these poor neighborhoods and run into he could get mugged, he could anything like that could have happened. I don't know the particular neighborhood that he was going into, or what the circumstances were, but certainly this day and age, we face risks when we put ourselves out there. And it was no different for my dad, even into his 70s, a frail old man going into this poor neighborhood and tutoring this young Vietnamese boy. And his willingness to do that hard thing with any number of risks, and his faithfulness in doing that, and the hope he had in the knowledge that whatever may have happened to him circumstantially would be under the protection of the hope that he had in worshiping and serving God as God created us to do. Point being, when we look at what Jesus has done for us and what he promises to us, no sacrifice is too great. Our hope empowers us to do great works for others, and also our hope protects us from adversity. We learn this in the book of 2 Corinthians. This is one of my life verses, 2 Corinthians 4:16 through 18. We do not lose heart, but though our outer man is decaying, our inner man is being renewed day by day. And here's the key. For our momentary light affliction is producing for us an eternal weight of glory far beyond all comparison. Any of these afflictions or adversities we might face, Paul calls upon us to look at those as momentary and light afflictions. And I don't know if you can hear in the background, my dog is about due to get walked, and he's at my feet and kind of whining because he doesn't have an eternal perspective on his momentary and light affliction of wanting to go take a walk. We as Christians don't have to face that. Because we have an eternal weight of glory far beyond all comparison. We don't look at the things which are seen, but we look at the things which are not seen. The things which are not seen are eternal. We have this eternal perspective that carries us through our daily struggles. This verse, 2 Corinthians 4, verse 17 in particular, our light and momentary afflictions produce for us an eternal weight of glory far beyond all comparison. This verse was a key for me, inspiring me to get through my medical training. Because as a resident in training, I had very, very hard work and very, very long nights on call. My nights on duty were long and arduous. Probably the most long and arduous nights of call were when I was on the obstetric service, because you never knew when, just when you thought you were going to catch a few Z's, a woman in labor would come in, and you've got to immediately spring into action and make sure that this woman gets assessed and set up for delivery, and you're ready to go at a moment's notice. And you may have multiple patients ready to deliver simultaneously, and you're running around from room to room to room, and then the emergency room calls, and you've got to run down there because there's somebody with pain or some gynecologic related problem in the emergency room that needs to be assessed. And it was just chaos from 5 p.m. until 8 a.m. the next morning, when you've already worked a day and you've got another day ahead to work. And of course they've changed the rules so that that's no longer the case. But if you were on call for a day, that meant that you worked from 8 a.m., let's say on Monday, straight through until 6 or 7 o'clock or 5 or 6 p.m. on Tuesday. So a 32, 33, 34 hour shift was not uncommon. And particularly in the OB service, that's where you got the least amount of sleep, because there was the most stuff going on at night. and you would just be running around in chaos, and you would be exhausted and stressed out, and you would look at your watch and it's 10 p.m. And even though you've been working feverishly for the last 5 hours and you're exhausted, your shift isn't even a third of the way over with. And you've still got, another 10 hours ahead. And, God would speak to me in those situations and say, yeah, this is a 15-hour shift or a 32-hour shift, Dave, but these are light and momentary afflictions. Because what you're going through here is producing in you and in the work that you do an eternal weight of glory that far outweighs them all. So that's how our hope in Him and our knowledge of His inheritance and our eternal security with Him helps us to live and walk in our daily lives. So to summarize, our hope in Jesus gives us protection from fear in times of adversity, whether it is fatigue, whether it is stress, whether it is emotional upset. Our hope in Jesus protects us because we know that our eternal future in Him is in glory. That protection and that power empowers us to do great things for others, to tutor young kids in the inner city, to serve people who are difficult and challenging to serve, to do the good works that God has created for us. All right, so that is where we are going to wrap up now for today. Now, next week, we're going to expand on this, and we're going to go one more week on hope. And we're going to talk about how to cultivate hope in your lives and how to build into your life that sense of hope that carries you through adversity, through turmoil, and forward to the good works that God has called us to do. So that is where we will wrap things up for today. Thank you to everybody for listening. I deeply appreciate those who listen, those who comment, and those who reflect on this in their daily lives. And I appreciate your taking time to spend this time on a Sunday with me on my channel. Please feel free to leave your questions and comments in the comment box below. Always love to hear from folks in response to these videos. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like. When you hit that like button, as you know, that promotes this video in the search algorithms for other users. It's not for my ego that you would give this a like. It's just it's a recommendation for other folks who might enjoy and benefit from sharing this devotional time on Sundays. If you want to hear more from the channel, hit the subscribe key and you will get notified whenever new content is posted on the channel. That is it for this week. We will see you all next week. My dog is at me again, so I've got to get up from here and go walk the dog. And until next week, God bless you all and go in peace.